Corporal Hank "Doc" Reeves stared at the consent form, his hand hovering over the signature line. The sterile light of the underground bunker made the warnings on the document seem even more ominous. "You sure about this, Doc?" Lieutenant Benny Douglas asked, her voice tight with concern. Hank looked up at his commanding officer. "With all due respect, Lieutenant, have you seen what's left of Tampa? Or Miami? We don't have a choice." It had been 6 months since the Kradax made planetfall. 6 months of watching Earth's military might crumble against an enemy that could shrug off tank shells and crush armored vehicles with their bare hands. Hank signed the form. Hours later, he lay strapped to an operating table, surrounded by a team of grim-faced scientists. Dr. Amelia Valdez, the lead researcher, leaned over him. "Corporal Reeves, I need you to understand. The Berserker Protocol, it's not just about making you stronger. We're unlocking the full potential of the human body. Every system pushed to its absolute limit. We need soldiers who can think, not just fight." As the anesthesia took hold, Hank's last conscious thought was of the alien dropship he'd seen obliterate an Abrams tank with a single shot. The pain woke him. Every nerve ending was on fire, every muscle screaming in protest. Hank's eyes snapped open, and he found himself restrained, thrashing against reinforced straps. "Vitals are spiking," a voice shouted. "Hang on, Corporal." Dr. Valdez's face swam into view. "Your body is rewriting itself at the cellular level. Try to ride it out." Hank wanted to scream, but his vocal cords felt like they were being shredded and reformed. His vision blurred, colors shifting into spectrums he'd never seen before. And then, suddenly, clarity. The restraints designed to hold a man twice his size snapped like paper as Hank sat up. He could hear the startled gasps of the medical team, could smell the adrenaline pouring off them. Dr. Valdez approached cautiously, a tablet in her hand. "Corporal Reeves, how do you feel?" Hank looked down at his hands. They didn't look different, but he could feel the power thrumming through them. He picked up a stainless steel tray from a nearby table and crumpled it like aluminum foil. "I feel..." Hank paused, searching for the right word. "Ready." Alarms blared suddenly, and the bunker shook with the impact of distant explosions. Lieutenant Douglas's voice came over the intercom, tight with urgency. "Dr. Valdez, we're out of time. The Kradax have begun their assault on the research facility. Is he combat ready?" Valdez looked at Hank, a question in her eyes. Hank stood, marveling at how the world seemed to move in slow motion around him. He could count the dust particles disturbed by the distant explosions, could hear the elevated heartbeats of everyone in the room. "Where's my team, Doctor?" he asked, his voice steady. "It's time to show these aliens what humans are really capable of." As if in answer, the bunker door slid open, revealing 4 other soldiers, their eyes gleaming with the same heightened awareness that Hank now possessed. Lieutenant Douglas stepped forward, her gaze sweeping over the transformed soldiers. "All right, Berserkers, let's go remind the Kradax why it was a mistake to pick a fight with humanity." As Hank fell in line with his squad, he felt a surge of something he hadn't experienced since the invasion began. Hope. The Berserker Protocol was online, and the real war was about to begin. The Berserker squad moved through the underground facility with inhuman speed and precision. Hank "Doc" Reeves brought up the rear, his enhanced senses on high alert. He could hear the Kradax above them, their heavy footfalls reverberating through the reinforced ceiling. 6 hostiles, North Corridor, Lieutenant Douglas subvocalized, her augmented vocal cords producing sounds only the Berserkers could hear. "Carlson, Rodriguez, you're up." The 2-point men nodded, their movements a blur as they rounded the corner. Hank heard the brief, violent exchange, the surprised grunts of the Kradax, the sound of chitinous armor cracking under superhuman blows. Seconds later, Carlson's voice. "Clear." As they passed the fallen aliens, Hank couldn't help but marvel. He'd seen countless soldiers broken against the Kradax's natural armor. Now, looking at the pulverized exoskeletons, he allowed himself a grim smile. They reached the surface access point, and Douglas held up a fist. "Remember your training. We hit hard and fast. Doc, you're our ace in the hole. Keep us patched up and fighting." Hank nodded, feeling the weight of the advanced medical kit on his back. It was loaded with synthesized coagulants and stem cell accelerators, cutting-edge stuff that he now understood at a molecular level, thanks to his enhanced cognition. "Uploading battlefield data to your neural interfaces." Dr. Valdez's voice came through their comms. "Godspeed, Berserkers." The blast doors slid open, and they surged onto the battlefield. The scene that greeted them was apocalyptic. The research facility's defensive perimeter was in shambles, regular troops fighting a desperate holding action against waves of Kradax warriors. In the distance, one of the aliens' massive Strider vehicles loomed, its energy weapons cutting swathes through human defenses. "Neutralize that Strider," Douglas ordered. "Doc, with me, we'll clear a path." What followed was a symphony of violence. Hank moved in perfect sync with Douglas, their enhanced reflexes allowing them to anticipate and counter every Kradax attack. Where before the aliens had seemed unstoppable juggernauts, now they appeared almost sluggish. Kradax captain, easily 9 feet tall, charged at Hank with a roar that would have once shaken him to his core. Now he could see the microscopic gaps in the aliens' armor, could calculate the precise force needed to exploit them. Hank sidestepped the charge, his hand snapping out to strike a nerve cluster at the base of the Kradax's skull. The alien dropped like a stone. "Holy shit!" a nearby human soldier breathed, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Fall back to the secondary line," Hank ordered, his voice carrying an authority he'd never possessed before. "We'll handle this." As the regular troops retreated, Hank saw Carlson and Rodriguez engaging the Strider. They moved like acrobats, leaping impossible distances to scale the machine's legs. The Kradax gunners, used to targeting much slower enemies, couldn't land a hit. A scream of pain caught Hank's attention. Jang, the squad's demo expert, was down, purple Kradax blood mixing with her own red on the battlefield. Hank was at her side in an instant, his enhanced vision analyzing the wound even as he reached for his medkit. "Hang on, Jang, I've got you!" His hands moved with surgical precision, applying synthesized fibrin and guiding accelerated stem cells to knit the wound. In seconds, Jang was back on her feet, the grievous injury reduced to an angry red line. "Thanks, Doc," she grinned, hefting her weapon. "Let's go make these bastards extinct." A massive explosion rocked the battlefield. Hank turned to see the Strider collapse, its central power core breached by Carlson's well-placed charges. For the first time since the invasion, the Kradax line was breaking. The alien warriors, faced with an enemy that could match and exceed their physical prowess, began to fall back. Lieutenant Douglas's voice cut through the chaos. "Push the advantage. Show them what happens when they underestimate humanity." As Hank charged forward with his squad, he felt a surge of fierce joy. The Berserker protocol hadn't just enhanced their bodies, it had reignited the indomitable human spirit that had carried their species through countless trials. The Kradax had come expecting to crush a physically inferior species. Instead, they were facing the full, unleashed potential of humanity. And Hank Doc Reeves was ready to show them just how terrifying that potential could be. 3 weeks after their first engagement, Hank Doc Reeves crouched behind the twisted wreckage of a Kradax dropship, his enhanced hearing picking up the alien chatter beyond. The Berserker squad had been deployed to what remained of Chicago, tasked with taking out a Kradax command post. "I count 37 hostiles," Hank sub-vocalized to Lieutenant Douglas. "Including what looks like a war price." Douglas's reply was terse. "Acknowledged. We've never taken one of those down before. Ideas?" Hank's mind raced, processing tactical data faster than any unaugmented human could. Their neural architecture is similar to the Warriors, just more complex. If I can get close enough, I might be able to disrupt it. Might? Rodriguez chimed in, a hint of his old humor in his voice. It's that, or we see if it can survive a tactical nuke, Hank replied dryly. Douglas made the call. Do it, Doc. We'll create a diversion. Try not to die. The squad moved with practiced precision. Jang and Carlson launched a barrage of high-yield explosives, while Rodriguez provided covering fire with a salvaged Predax plasma cannon. The aliens responded with predictable fury, focusing their attention on the visible threats. Hank activated his adaptive camouflage, a recent addition to their arsenal, reverse-engineered from Predax tech. He moved through the chaos like a ghost, his enhanced muscles allowing him to leap and climb with inhuman agility. He reached the command post's perimeter, coming face-to-face with the war priest. The alien towered over him, its iridescent armor pulsing with eldritch energy. In its four-clawed hands, it wielded a staff that crackled with barely contained power. For a moment, Hank felt a flicker of his old fear. Then his Berserker conditioning kicked in, flooding his system with controlled adrenaline and focus. The war priest sensed him a second too late. Hank launched himself forward, his fingers finding the precise weak points in the alien's neural armor. He sent a carefully calibrated electrical pulse through his fingertips, a trick he'd developed by studying Predax physiology. The massive alien convulsed, its psychic defenses collapsing. Hank pressed the advantage, using every ounce of his enhanced strength to grapple with the war parade. "Douglas!" Oliver shouted over the comms. "I could use an assist." The lieutenant was there in an instant, her augmented legs propelling her over the battlefield. Together they managed to bring the war prior down, its death cry sending nearby Predax into disarray. As the dust settled, Hank looked around at the devastation. The command post was in ruins, its defenders eliminated. But the cost had been high. Carlson was down, a Predax energy weapon having punched through his left shoulder. Hank was at his side in an instant, medikit already deployed. "Hang in there, buddy. I've got you." As he worked to stabilize Carlson, Hank's enhanced hearing picked up a transmission from the Predax ship in orbit. His blood ran cold as his implants translated the alien language. "Lieutenant," he said, his voice grave. "We've got a problem. They're calling for reinforcements, a lot of them." Douglas's face hardened. "How many?" "Enough to glass the entire continent." The squad fell silent, the weight of the situation settling over them. They'd won the battle, but the war was far from over. Zhang was the first to speak. "So what do we do, Lieutenant?" "Fall back?" Douglas looked at each of them, her gaze finally settling on Hank. "Doc, you've pulled off one miracle today. Think you've got another in you?" Hank's mind was already racing, piecing together everything he'd learned about Predax biology and technology. A plan began to form, audacious and terrifying in its scope. "Maybe," he said slowly, "but we're going to need a ship. And a whole lot of luck." Douglas's lips curled into a fierce grin. "Luck? Who needs it? We've got science and good old human ingenuity on our side." As they began to plan their next move, Hank felt a surge of determination. The Predax thought they had the upper hand, but they were about to learn a harsh lesson about human resilience. The Berserkers were going to take the fight to the stars, and Hank, Doc Reeves, was ready to make history. Or die trying. The cockpit, Hank Doc Reeves' fingers danced over the alien controls, his enhanced mind interfacing directly with the ship's systems. "Status report," Lieutenant Douglas barked from the co-pilot's seat. "We're holding together," Hank replied, his voice tense. "Barely. Our disguise is working so far, but we'll be in visual range of the mothership in 3 minutes." In the cargo hold, the rest of the squad made final preparations. Their plan was audacious, bordering on insane. Infiltrate the Predax mothership, release a tailored bioweapon, and escape before the ship's automated systems could respond. The bioweapon was Hank's brainchild, a marvel of hybridized human and Kradax genetics. It would target the aliens' unique biology while leaving humans unaffected, in theory at least. "Mothership in visual range," Hank announced. "Here we go." The Kradax vessel loomed before them, a behemoth of alien architecture that dwarfed anything humanity had ever built. Hank felt a bead of sweat trickle down his spine as they approached the docking bay. "Incoming transmission," Douglas warned. Hank nodded, activating the comm system. A harsh, clicking language filled the cockpit. Thanks to his neural implants, Hank understood and responded in perfect Kradax. "Shuttle XV-238 requesting emergency docking. Critical system failure imminent." There was a tense pause before the alien controller responded. "Granted. Proceed to Bay 7 Alpha." As they maneuvered into the massive docking bay, Hank allowed himself a small smile. Phase 1 complete. The moment they touched down, all hell broke loose. Jang detonated a series of EMP charges, temporarily disabling the bay's internal sensors. The squad burst from the shuttle, moving with superhuman speed and precision. "Remember," Douglas shouted as they fought their way through the surprised Kradax defenders. "We have 10 minutes before ship-wide systems reboot. Make them count." Hank led the charge towards the ship's central ventilation system. The canister of bioweapon clutched tightly in his hands. Carlson and Rodriguez provided covering fire, their augmented accuracy turning each shot into a kill. They reached the access point, but a squad of Kradax elites blocked their path. At their head stood another war prize, its psychic aura palpable even to Hank's enhanced senses. "I'll handle this," Hank growled. "Get that bioweapon deployed." He charged the war prize, every cell in his body pushed to its absolute limit. The alien met his charge with a psychic blast that would have liquefied a normal human's brain. Hank gritted his teeth and pushed through, his mind shielded by layers of technological and biological enhancements. The battle that followed was a blur of impossible speed and strength. Hank moved with surgical precision, targeting nerve clusters and weak points in the war priest's armor, but the alien was formidable, its psychic attacks growing stronger with each passing second. Just as Hank felt his defenses beginning to crack, a familiar voice rang out. "Dog, move!" He dove to the side as Zhang's last EMP charge detonated, disrupting the war priest's neural implants. Hank seized the moment, delivering a crushing blow to the alien's skull. As the war priest fell, Hank became aware of a new sound, klaxons blaring throughout the ship. "Bioweapon deployed," Douglas reported, her voice tight with urgency. "But they've adapted faster than we anticipated. We need to move now." They fought their way back to the shuttle, the ship's atmosphere already growing thick with the bioweapons mist. Around them, Kradax soldiers began to falter, their movements growing erratic. They reached the shuttle just as the docking bay doors began to close. Hank threw himself into the pilot's seat, his fingers a blur over the controls. The engines roared to life, and they shot out of the bay with barely inches to spare. As they sped away from the mothership, the squad watched in awe as the massive vessel began to list, its engines sputtering and dying. "My God!" Rodriguez breathed. "We did it." But their victory was short-lived. A wave of smaller Kradax fighters poured from the dying mothership, their weapons locking onto the fleeing shuttle. "Brace for impact," Hank shouted, pushing the stolen craft to its limits. Energy beams lanced past them, one clipping their wing. The shuttle spun wildly, alarms blaring as they plummeted towards Earth's atmosphere. Hank fought for control, his enhanced reflexes and the shuttle's alien technology working in perfect sync. They hit the atmosphere at a dangerous angle, the hull temperature spiking to near critical levels. "If anyone's got any last tricks up their sleeve," Douglas shouted over the roar of Reentry, "now's the time." Hank's mind raced, processing variables faster than any computer. In that moment of crisis, he felt something new awaken within him, a deeper connection to the Berserker protocol, a wellspring of untapped potential. His consciousness seemed to expand, interfacing directly with the shuttle's systems at a level beyond mere technology. He felt the heat of reentry, the pull of gravity, the complex dance of forces threatening to tear them apart, and then, with a clarity that bordered on the divine, he saw the solution. Hank's hands moved with inhuman speed and precision, coaxing impossible maneuvers from the alien craft. They corkscrewed through the atmosphere, the pursuing Kradax fighters unable to match their trajectory. When they finally broke through the cloud cover, a cheer went up from the squad. Below them, the battlefields of Earth stretched out, but something was different. The Kradax forces were in disarray, their coordinated assaults falling apart as news of the mothership's fate spread. As Hank guided them towards the nearest human base, he allowed himself a moment of reflection. They had done the impossible, turned the tide of a war that had seemed hopeless. But more than that, they had proven something fundamental about humanity. In their darkest hour, faced with an enemy that outmatched them in every way, they had adapted, evolved, and emerged stronger than ever. The Berserker Protocol wasn't just a scientific breakthrough. It was the key to unlocking humanity's true potential. And as Hank looked at his squad, their eyes shining with the same awakened power he now felt, he knew this was just the beginning. The Kradax had come to conquer Earth. Instead, they had unleashed a force that would reshape the galaxy. Humanity was no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting for their destiny among the stars. And Hank "Doc" Reeves, once a simple combat medic, now stood at the forefront of this new era. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he was ready to face them, armed with the indomitable human spirit and the unleashed power of human potential. The war wasn't over, but for the first time since the Kradax arrived, the future looked bright. Humanity had remembered its strength, and the galaxy would never be the same. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed it a lot. If you did, please be sure to give it a like. Feel free to comment and share this story too. It helps the channel grow. Let's make this channel huge together.